Okay, so the first item is the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Deputy. Seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. On the question, all those in favor, please show a hand. Thank you. And anybody contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thanks. Folks, can we just all put ourselves on mute if you're not speaking, please? Thank you. Next item, Common Clerk.
Item 4, Your Worship, is disclosures of conflict of interest.
Okay, by show of hands, does anybody have a conflict of interest tonight? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you. Next item.
Item 6, members' comments.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to wish everybody Happy Canada Day. It's on Wednesday, and I wanted to say thank you to so many citizens who have decorated their properties, either their homes or their businesses, with Canadian flags and banners. And I think it's very nice to have that in the city, and it looks good when you're going around and seeing the whole neighborhood. So just congratulations to everybody for doing that, and I hope that they enjoy the day. And I hope that everybody as a family or friends and family get together, not more than 50, and have a good time.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Deputy. And just let council and those watching at home know, call-in user number 2 is our city manager who is participating in the meeting tonight as a call-in user, just so you know. Okay, anyone else? Members' comments? Okay, thanks. I just, very, very quickly for me, I just was thinking about it prior to the meeting. And just really a thank you. 28 meetings so far in 2020 on top of everything else going on in the work plan. Tonight is quite a light kit for the items we're dealing with, but quite typically we have hundreds and hundreds of pages, which include every item, a staff report. So really just a reflection of gratitude as we go into Canada Day, as the deputy said, to our staff and our teams. Again, 28 council, committee, PAC and special meetings since January 1st, and every one of those takes a massive amount of work to get prepared for, and to my council colleagues for reading all that information so we can be ready. Just a thanks. Okay, next item, please, Common Clerk.
Item 11.1 on your agenda is a submission from Councillor Norton, and it's entitled Ernst & Young Operational Review.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Norton. You have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just bringing it up right now. For the benefit of the public that's listening, if I get a seconder, I'll speak to the motion, but I will read the motion. It reads as follows. Be it resolved that a special meeting of Common Council be scheduled in open for the exclusive and comprehensive presentation of the Ernst & Young City of St. John Operational Review. Be it resolved that the presentation of the Ernst & Young City of St. John Operational Review be delivered by official agents of Ernst & Young who were commissioned by the Department of Environment and Local Government to conduct an independent operational review of the City of St. John. And be it resolved that the presentation of the City of St. John Operational Review by Ernst & Young be scheduled within the next 2 weeks, with appreciation for the logistical and scheduling challenges that may make it difficult to meet this timeline. If I get a seconder, I can speak to some specifics.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Strobridge. Second, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strobridge, for seconding that motion, putting it on the table. For councillors that may have concerns as it relates to the 2-week timeline, I do understand that E&Y will be available to present on the 20th. I'm not sure where that lands on the calendar, but I do know that the 20th seems to be a date that has been confirmed by folks that are familiar with this. So it does fall within that. I also understand that they are excited and looking forward to presenting this as authors of the commission report. It will come at no cost to City of St. John taxpayers. So for those that are listening that are concerned with another study and possibly a subsequent bill as it relates to the consultants coming in and presenting. It will come at no cost, and we won't bear any bill as it relates to that. It would be standard practice in the industry at the conclusion of the commissioning of the study for them to come in and do so. So I look forward to doing that. I think it's in the best interest of not only those that are engaged with the sustainability of the city of St. John as it relates to this 107-page report and other reports that have shed some light on what are our constraints and where are opportunities that seeing and hearing from a third party as it relates to their expertise and their I guess their breadth of expertise in terms of what they've seen in other jurisdictions, what we could benefit from, what are some of our challenges, what are some of our opportunities. But hearing from that third party voice, I think, is always beneficial. I think it also allows the consultants themselves to stand in front of council and the city of St. John taxpayer and defend their own findings. It allows our staff to have somewhat of a little bit of breathing room so that they're not put in the precarious position where they have to defend somebody else's work. And so I think there's some benefit to that as well. Whenever we have an opportunity to get some more information, I think it makes our job maybe not easier, but it gives us more angles and more tools in our toolbox to do it that much more effectively. I'll end on this. It's critical that we hear from E&Y. I would say that in many places, if you commissioned a $303,000 report, that it would just be standard practice to hear from those folks. And I think this is one of those things that we should be following standard practice, invite them in and hear what they have to say, and allow the councillors around this horseshoe to hear from their constituents about what are some of the curious things that are in that report, what are some of the things that they find perplexing, and whatever other questions come to mind, and allow them to stand in front of us and answer those questions. I think we all have a vested interest in this one, and it's certainly a big report that is driving the agenda as it relates to sustainability now and into the future. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Okay, comments, Deputy Mayor. You're muted, Deputy.
Okay, thank you, Worship. I guess, I can hear from E&Y one way or the other, but what concerns me is that, first of all, this report was commissioned by the province, and I think we've had the report for, I don't know, maybe 2 months, maybe whatever time we got it, the public got it because it was on our webpage, and we've all read this report. So we're being very transparent about it. Anybody could read it. There's some very good information in that report. And for me, and I think most of the other council members, we've kind of used some of that information to date to make some of our decisions. And I'm not saying that E&Y couldn't, give us more information. But my problem is that I thought this report was commissioned by the province. I thought it was supposed to be done independently. And now I'm thinking, well, maybe it wasn't. One member of council has a contact with E&Y Associates and stating Councillor Norton just stated that they want to come. Nobody from E&Y has called me to tell me they want to come. I haven't heard from E&Y. The cost was put in the councillor's presentation, $300,000. Nobody from the province, to my estimate, information anyway, told me what the cost was of the report. And it just, my mind is baffled because I'm hearing from some citizens that think, particularly in relating to the fire service, for instance, because I've got a couple calls even today, and it seems that they think that if E&Y present that, there's different information going to come out. So I'm thinking, what is this all about? Is E&Y, I mean, they gave us a report. I would assume that it's the truth, that the report that they gave us, I hope it was. And I just don't know why at this late date, all of a sudden we think, or the public seem to be as sort of, they're thinking anyway, that this is going to change our minds on certain decisions. So I would like to ask our staff or anybody that can answer me where am I on this? I mean, I read the E&Y report, same as everyone else, and I would hope that if E&Y are in contact with a council member, they should be in contact with all of us, or maybe none of us, because it isn't our report. So, I mean, I'm asking that in no reflection on Councilor Norton, but I do need to know in my heart where this is coming from. Am I being led down the garden path, or am I being led on the right road? So, Your Worship, I called you about it. I just want to know.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. I'll go to our acting city manager tonight, and I'm just looking. I think our commissioner of finance is away, but Ms. Hamilton, can I have you make a few comments, and then we'll see where we go.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to the deputy. Certainly, I can confirm that the E&Y report was a provincially led third-party operational audit of city services, while the city did provide support in terms of data collection, engagement with the consultants, and was involved in the review of the findings. It was most definitely a third-party review, and the deputy is correct. The city and council has advanced many of the recommendations as part of the Sustaining St. John Plan and related workforce restructuring initiatives. We, as a result of council's previous direction, the city manager has directed staff to return to the council in the fall with recommendations related to further implementation of the E&Y report. Certainly, the presentation from the consultants could provide additional context for council in terms of decision making. But I would stress that the timeline related to the consultant's report from a staff perspective cannot be accelerated given the priority on the various sustainability initiatives currently in the staff work plan. I do understand that our Chief Financial Officer has been in contact with E&Y and has confirmed their availability to present to council on July 20th, and that would be the earliest date that they would be available to present. But certainly we could accommodate that from a scheduling perspective, but in terms of the report back on the implementation plan, that is targeted for fall.
Okay, thank you, acting city manager. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. I see you, Councillor Casey, will come to you next. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I mentioned this in a conversation we had last week, that I'm certainly in support of hearing from the folks who authored the report. I guess I would be concerned if we didn't bring this forward and take this opportunity, that it would reflect on us. I mean, I don't know what we have to hide. The report is public report. So I think if you ever have the opportunity to hear from the author of a report, we should take that opportunity. And also, I think, you mentioned at the top, Your Worship, that we do a lot of reading in our kits to prepare for meetings. Not everybody is a reader. I think many follow us and watch us online to pick up on what we're doing. And to have the opportunity to hear from the authors themselves in an open meeting. If citizens know it's coming, they have an opportunity to dialogue with their counselors about questions to ask. And I think it fits well with what the acting city manager just mentioned. Ms. Hamilton said, and I don't think in moving this motion forward, it changes the schedule for when staff report back. If anything, I think it helps everybody to have further clarity on what we're talking about when that time comes. I'm certainly willing to put in the time. I think it is a well invested evening hope on the 20th, hopefully, to hear from the authors of the report. And I do have a little bit of concern with respect to comments that we shouldn't do homework before bringing motions forward. Certainly the counselor, I think in doing due diligence, when thinking about this motion, you contact Ernst & Young and find out the details. Many years ago, I brought a motion forward before council to talk about recycling because we didn't have beverage recycling in all city facilities. And I certainly contacted some recyclers in the area to find out more about the idea. That's just good homework. So I fully support the councilor's idea. I think we should hear from them. And I think to not hear from them would be a huge mistake. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Casey, please. Yeah, I see you, Councillor McKenzie. Thank you, Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I have no problem if they want to come in. Did staff get confirmation that there's not going to be any cost to this, or?
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Was that discussed?
Your Worship, I don't believe that there's a cost associated with this. This was a provincial initiative, not a city-funded initiative. However, I would have to follow up with the Chief Financial Officer to confirm that.
Thank you.
Well, that's not overly helpful for the vote tonight, now is it? All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKenzie, please.
Thank you, Worship. I believe that we need to hear from them, but I don't know that we need to hear from them right away. We've had the report for 3 months. It was commissioned by the province. I don't know if cabinet has heard from them or not. And I wouldn't want to bring them in twice. If we're bringing them in early fall, that's when staff's going to be prepared with the report. I think just one stop would do it all. And so I'm inclined to bring them in definitely and hear from them, but well prepared to do so for staff. And I'd be interested in knowing if the MLAs have heard from them, where it was their report. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not sure maybe I'll just take them as comments. I'm not sure there was a question there or not. I'm not sure if any of us could answer whether whether the MLAs have heard from them or cabinet or not. That would be certainly from my perspective, speculation, but I see you, Deputy, but I'm going to go to Councillor Reardon first, please. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Worship. I guess I would feel similar to that. I am interested in hearing from them. When I read through the report, page 1 is the cover page, and page 2 in our report claims that Ernst & Young, we do not accept or assume responsibility to anyone other than the Department of the Environment and Local Government for this report or the opinions formed in it. And they do list some limitations, and one of them is a time limitation prevented a deep analysis in all service areas. And so for those reasons, I would like to have an opportunity for staff to digest that report. And then when we bring Ernst & Young in, I think that they would have, and we would have a better understanding, and we'd be able to ask better questions at that point in time. For them to come and present it is great, but I don't have enough background yet, and staff wouldn't have the background yet. I don't feel like like I'm hiding anything, and I'm not asking them to defend the report. I just think we would make better use of their time if they came after we've had an opportunity to digest it. I think that's fair ball for staff as well, for us to have a look at that report and see how it applies to us. There's so much in it. I could have written it myself. There's so much in it that we've talked about over these last 4 years. So it's a good report, but I would like to see how it impacts us specifically. And they state in the report that they're not experts on any of the stuff, but we do have some experts in-house that can probably, also help with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just first time commenters first. Anyone else for first round? Sorry. Okay, thank you. I saw your hand back up, Deputy. I'll go to you.
Your worship, before I could vote, I mean, I got to think about what happened a week ago. And our city manager said, when this was brought up a week ago, I recall him saying it would cost us a lot of money to have E&Y present. Now, I don't know where that came from or where he got that, but I would want to know. You know, I'm not against having them to come in to report, but I just want to know, you know, I want to know if it's going to cost us any money for them to come in to report. And, you know, I'm assuming, I mean, I have great faith in E&Y, so I mean, I feel that the report that they wrote was certainly, they did a lot of research before they did the report. So I would expect that their presentation will go right along with their report. And of course, I don't really see any big, I don't know if it has to be done in July. I just, I want to know whether we are paying to have it, have them presented or whether there is no cost. And I need to know from E&Y, I guess. And I don't know how we do that before we vote.
Okay.
Or we table until that time.
Sorry, our acting city manager's putting her hand up, and then perhaps as we're debating here, the author of the motion could consider, you know, subject to no cost or subject to a very minimal amount of money here. But I'll go to the acting city manager, and then we'll come back. Thank you, Ms. Hamilton.
Your worship, I was able to confirm with staff that E&Y will do the presentation at no cost to the city.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
So then why would the city manager tell us a week ago, your worship, that it would
Your worship, may I? City manager.
cost a lot of money?
Yeah,
It's
thank
only
you.
7 days since our last meeting.
Well, we wouldn't have known, Deputy, but the city manager is jumping in here. Go ahead, city manager.
Your worship, if I may, my comments last week were based on an assumption, and we all know what happens with assumptions. We did not pay for this report, and within the request for proposal, there was no plans for formal briefings after the report was submitted. When the report was submitted, the contract was in fact complete. So I had made an assumption that if we called them back, that it would in fact cost us money. The staff has since verified with Ernst & Young that they are willing to do this, if you will, without charge. So certainly that is positive news. I guess my only issue with this motion is, quite frankly, one of timing. Just to be clear, when we will present to you a review of the findings, because the findings do need to be reviewed, and Ernst & Young will be the first to tell you that they may not have gotten it all right. So we have to do the full exhaustive review of findings, and when we were going to do that in the fall, we were going to have Ernst & Young in the room with us to present that and also to deal with your questions. If it's the will of council to have a separate presentation by Ernst & Young, I fully understand and recognize that, but I would suggest to you that the timing of July is not the best timing. What's going to happen is if this is presented in July, it's just going to sit out there. They're going to take their 100-page plus document and present to you their findings, their point of view, and then you are going to have to wait some 2 or 3 months before you actually get the staff analysis of those same findings. Therefore, I believe that if council wished to have such a presentation from Ernst & Young, it would be better served in the early fall, just prior to the staff making its presentation. Otherwise, the time frame between the two is fairly pronounced, and again, we're just going to be opening a one-sided debate until the fall time frame. And I don't mean to make it sound like a debate. We did recommend that the report be fully endorsed by council. We stand by that recommendation and council's resolution on that issue, but there will always be perspectives within it that need to be discussed.
Okay, thank you, city manager. I'm going to go to Councillor Hickey, and then I'm going to make just a couple of comments, and then I'm going to go back to Councillor Norton. Councillor Hickey. You seem to have frozen there for a moment, Councillor. Okay, perhaps I'll jump in and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Hickey. So first of all, thank you. Thank you for the discussion. When I was reflecting on this, I think it just makes sense. Everything that we're talking about right now is about sustainability and reforming our city, reshaping our city, that we redefine what it looks like to grow, thrive, economically, socially, culturally. Those are my terms. So I think that, the report certainly confirmed. I think Councillor Reardon said, there weren't great surprises there, but I can certainly tell you from my perspective, it was great to have a powerhouse like Ernst & Young confirm that we have a lot of opportunity within this city. I think we should take every opportunity to get the message out as many times as needed. It's really hard to communicate these types of documents and these types of findings. We should do it as often as we can, and I think we should do it now. I like the timing of July. I think no government has ever been accused of being too open or too transparent. We've certainly been accused of the lack of openness and transparency. And why I say the timing, I think, is important now. Even us, with respect, council and to the city, we're celebrating Ernst & Young in some breaths. And in other breaths, we're saying, we need more conversation and more data. Some groups are taking what I think is pretty straight up boilerplate language in the front of the Ernst & Young report and suggesting that nothing is good within the Ernst & Young report. So I think the sooner we have folks come in, I think the better. They're the authors. And I think it does give us that opportunity to ask questions and reflect. As the city manager said, our staff work on their own implementation plan, because I don't know about you, but I'm in daily conversations about the Ernst & Young report. We've already accepted the report. We've already asked for an implementation plan. And, again, I think it's prudent. I don't want to sound like, theatrical here. It's almost an injustice in my mind to taxpayers not to bring them in and hear from the authors directly and have that opportunity to ask the questions right now and reflect as we go through the next number of months, because we are reshaping the city. So I'll stop there. I'm in full support. I think they should come in hindsight. I think they should have come in a while ago. So the next best time for them to come in is July 20th rather than wait another couple of months. So, okay, thank you. Councillor Hickey, you seem to be unfrozen.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Had some technical issues. Just one question, and I think you summed up my comments well. Is the understanding that Ernst & Young would then come in both with the city's implementation strategy and with this presentation to any staff, I guess?
Yeah.
Or to Councillor Norton, whoever would like it.
Well, let's have the acting city manager. I think what we just heard was that the city manager had intended on perhaps having EY join us in the fall, and we have a motion on the table that would have them come in sooner. Acting city manager, comment?
Yes, Worship.
Sorry, I don't know city manager, should I be referring to you tonight in this meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
my apologies, Worship. This agenda item, because it has a long look, I thought it was appropriate for me to dial in on. Ms. Jacqueline Hamilton is certainly the acting city manager, but I certainly plan on being back in the chair for next fall. I think the answer to Councillor Hickey's question is I guess it will depend. It will depend whether or not the session in July answers all of the councillors' questions, or whether there will be a need for them to come back as we present our analysis of their findings in the fall. And that can be a judgment call after the presentation of July if this presentation goes through.
Okay, thank you. I guess my only concern with this is that does this open us up to a lot of unanswered questions and really not being able to have staff offer a full commentary on the report? That's my biggest concern.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Norton, we'll come back to you. I see you, Councillor Reardon. Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't say it more eloquently than has already been said by you, Your Worship, and Councillor Sullivan certainly expressed some of my sentiments as well. I would certainly disagree with the city manager in the fact that in hindsight, I think it would have been prudent to have EMY come in weeks ago, if not a couple months ago when the report was first published. We have right now. I'm in daily conversation, in correspondence with people that are either critics or they're proponents of the EMY study, and to delay the E&Y consultants from coming in and presenting on their own findings anymore only does a disservice. It aggravates both sides, those that are certainly proponents of their work and those that are critics, those that find holes in the validity of their work, and those that find that it's absolutely foolproof. So I think having them in on the 20th is a timeline that's favorable. And we're asking questions of the city manager, such as Councillor Hickey. Are we going to bring them in again? Well, I would frankly say to the councillor, if we want to bring them in again, we do.
Yeah.
We want to bring them in again, we do. But that's not the point here. The point is we owe a service to the taxpaying public that paid $303K for a study and hasn't heard from the consultants. And that needs to happen. If we want to bring them in 2, 3, 4, 5 times again, we do that. And I've already stated that it would be the 20th. That was verified by the acting CM. I've already said that would be no cost to the taxpayer. It's no cost to the taxpayer. We get them in. Let's have some questions. If we're concerned only with the time that it takes to have a meeting and the cost and the scheduling, all those have been answered. I suggest they get here on the 20th so that the public can have a chance to engage with you councillors, questions that they have. You can ask the consultants directly, but I'm no longer relying solely upon the interpretation of staff as it relates to a consultant's report. I want to hear from the consultants directly as it relates to the operational review for the city of St. John. I'm making the decisions. I want to hear from the third party that otherwise has no vested interest in the city of St. John, but I certainly do. And as a result, I want to do my due diligence, and that's part of it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I guess for me, for clarification for the public, it's not our report, it's about us. And it was commissioned by someone else, the province, for $300,000. And when you commission a report like that, you put out an RFP with some parameters in it. So, you know, when I read through it, I can certainly see where it's geared more towards in favorable of the province versus us. So I am nervous about bringing this forward without proper context, which I think would come from staff. And I guess I have more faith in staff to say that I think they can read this report and tell me how it relates to what this city's doing. And that's where my allegiance is. They say right in the report on page 2, their allegiance is to the Department of Local Government and the Environment. So this is where I'm having a bit of a struggle with this. I feel like I need staff to have a look at that report, digest it, and be able to ask the appropriate questions. I mean, they're flying in, they're doing a reconnaissance mission. They've looked at everything. They say right in the report they didn't have enough time to delve into it deeply, but we can do that and then review those findings in conjunction with what we already know. I think that'll give us the best outcome. If you want to bring them in 15 times, that's great, as long as they're not charging me to come in. But if I've only got one crack at it, I want to have that reviewed by staff. I've looked at it, but I want it reviewed by staff, and then I want to bring them in. I'd prefer to have staff present and have them there for me to relay questions to as it relates to what staff has found out. That would be my preference. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Oh, yep. Go ahead.
I haven't heard one person around the table say they didn't want to hear from Ernst & Young. I think the whole council is being very transparent by having the report online, and certainly looking forward to having a full transparent discussion with Ernst & Young and staff in the room in the fall. I'm a little bit concerned that because there's a view of timing here, and for good reason on both sides, I suppose, that people are saying, well, you don't want to be transparent. And certainly do want to be transparent, but also want to have all the questions answered, not have to go back 2 or 3 times. And when we say they're willing to come in and present at no cost, maybe they are. How many times are they willing to do that at no cost? So I think that, if you're getting a little bit of pressure because there's groups out there using some of the wording in the report, that's not going to stop because they come in and present. That's just an argument that people are putting forward because they don't agree with the report. So I'm certainly willing to be open and transparent. I want to have one discussion. I want it one stop, everything answered in one meeting. And if people are going to pick and choose what they want out of that report and think that that's going to be taken verbatim, that's crazy. So I'm if that's the reason that we're doing this, I'm definitely not supporting that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to you to wrap us up, Councillor Norton. I have a couple other comments. I think Deputy, you've spoken twice. I think anyone else that hasn't spoken twice like to speak? Okay, thank you. So look, folks, interesting debate. I think from my reflection, whether I agree with it or not, we suffer from trust issues, confidence issues. Clearly, whether I like the letter or not, we got the letter from Minister Carr. We are restructuring. We are grabbing the bull, as they say, by the horns here. This should, in my view, absolutely be a yes. It's 12 to 18 million dollars in opportunities identified. And I'm really worried about the message, waiting 3 more months, until our staff are ready with their implementation plan, I think is the wrong approach. And from my perspective, I think we should get them in. We should ask our questions. If they won't come back a second time for free, then I'm sure the city can afford a few $1,000s to pay them to come back again. So from my perspective, I'd really encourage us to get them in now, have this conversation, have them walk us through their process. I mean, EY is a global organization. I think they've been unfairly disparaged in the last couple of weeks, and I think we should put that that message aside and have them walk through their findings. It's separate of the issues around not only our COVID-19 impacts, around $5 million, and the grass we're not able to mow and the flowers we're not able to put out, separate of the $10 million deficit that we have. Those are separate discussions. We're already acting on those items. In fact, council's already made those votes. So look, from my perspective, I think we should, I'm even worried about this debate. And I know it's just a good debate and it's sharing of perspectives, but I certainly believe from a citizen's perspective, delaying the presentation of this audit from EY doesn't send the right message for us. Thank you. Councillor Norton, wrap us up, please.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I can't agree more. We have an obligation. First off, for those that are under the assumption that they would like to wrap this conversation up in one meeting, have one vote, and do it all in one-stop shop is, from my perspective, not granted in reality when we're talking about cutting services. We're talking about a comprehensive plan for the sustainability of St. John. It's not a one-stop shop or a one-stop vote. This is a continuation. And this is part of the continuation. This is something that will never stop. If we're under that assumption, then by all means, then cast your vote as you will. The purpose of this
clarification, Your Worship,
is I have the floor right now, Councillor McKenzie. Councillor McKenzie, I have the floor. This motion is not to answer to specific critics. This motion is not to satisfy proponents for or against the review. What this motion is for is to allow those that have an interest in the city of St. John to hear from those that
publish a 107-page report for our benefit at the cost of New Brunswick taxpayers. And I've heard even from New Brunswickers themselves that they would like to hear from the consultants themselves that have paid for this report for our benefit. If we are for or against it, we have an obligation to hear from those that conducted the study, whether it was their methodology, whether it was their data collection efforts, whether it was how they quantified things, whether it was how they collated their results. We have an obligation in time in our evening to hear from those folks that did it. And we can only benefit from it. We can only benefit from the clarity that they will bring to the discussion. It's not going to add more confusion. It's only going to pacify one of both sides. But we have an obligation to hear from them, to collect as much information we can from as many angles as we can for the complexities that we have before us. Not to do so is irresponsible. I hope, and I absolutely can't believe that this discussion's taking this long, especially for something that is going to be at no cost to us, but has already cost $303,000 to the study. Some say, well, they're excited to come in. Of course they're excited to come in, because that's common practice. When someone pays over $300K for a study, they come in and they publish and they produce a presentation as it relates to their reviews.
Okay,
We haven't done that. Let's get on with this, folks.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Councillor. Okay, thank you for the debate, folks. The motion is on the floor. I'm going to call the question, please, by show of hands. All those in favor of the motion? Thank you. Hold on, just keep the hands up. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that right? Yep. Thank you. And those opposed, contrary minded? Councillor Reardon, Councillor McKenzie? Okay, thank you. The motion's carried. Thank you. Next item, Common Clerk.
Yes, Your Worship. Item 12.1 on your agenda is a staff report entitled Economic and Community Recovery, Open Streets in the City of St.
Okay,
John.
Commissioner Hamilton, I'm going to ask you to introduce, please.
Yes, good evening, Council. Before Council this evening are several recommendations to advance the city's Open Streets program, really following on the direction provided by Council on June 22nd. And just a reminder, this initiative is related to the city's efforts to support the economic and community recovery from the impacts of the pandemic. Over the course of the last week, staff have had follow-up engagement with key stakeholders, including the business community, on plans for open streets, and are preparing to adapt our plans to address areas of feedback. The decisions before you this evening are of a policy and bylaw nature that will unlock the potential to move forward with this program, and not necessarily the detailed operations plans which are being developed by staff on the implementation of these events. With that as an introduction, I'll now turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Ville to provide an overall update on the Open Streets initiatives and the recommendations before you this evening.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship, to members of Council. So pleased to be here presenting before you again this week, and would like to thank Council for moving so quickly to enable the approval process for the Open Streets initiative. As mentioned previously, there is no playbook for how a city is expected to support economic recovery, as each community has approached it differently. Here in St. John, we are actively implementing a multifaceted approach. We have a pedestrianization of South Market Street, the rescoping of 2020 arts and community grants, a pop-up park beside Loyas Plaza, for those who are not aware, has already been leveled off and the sod will be placed on very shortly. A rewelcoming of the Thursday night market, which just had the second iteration of it this past week. Again, a very successful one. A traveling picnic table initiative, which will be soon rolled out. The launching of a shipping container beer garden, among a variety of others. So last week, we shared with you our plans for a rotating open street initiative in the Uptown, spanning 12 consecutive weekends from the coming weekend until mid-September. We took the opportunity to listen and discuss with local partners and businesses, as Jacqueline has mentioned, and they gave us some really good feedback, and there's some themes from that feedback. So one is that there's a small group of businesses that I would say are very excited about the initiative, and a small group of businesses that are very concerned about the initiative. And then there's probably a larger group that is just neutral about the idea. There's a stronger consensus on piloting the Open Streets initiative from the rotating streets approach. The length of the weekend open street opening could be shorter than the 3 days that we identified last week. There may be some tweaking to what selection of streets is best served for the open street. And businesses are starting to think about how they could use the open street to support the animation of their business. But at the current time, many businesses do not intend to invest heavily on temporary infrastructure to support the animation and do not seem ready to cobble together something in the very quick timeline that we've given. After considering all the great feedback from local businesses and partners, it continues to be staff's recommendation to proceed with the planning for our Open Streets initiative, but with some tweaks of what we shared with you last week. Most notably, we'll be holding our first Open Street on Grandin and Canterbury, not this weekend, but the following weekend. It was initially planned for the 3rd to the 5th, but we think doing it on the weekend after is better. Instead of being a 3-day event to start off with for this first one from Friday to Sunday, it will only be for Saturday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. We intend to proceed with the first 3 open street scenarios, and evaluate from there whether the Open Streets initiative needs to change, whether we need to expand it, retract it, or alter it, at which point we can confirm the schedule for the remainder of the summer and early fall. These changes do not interfere with a third reading before you this evening, as the amendments to the traffic bylaw do not entrench the precise sequencing or programming outlined in the report, but instead the amendments offer the city manager authority to make a decision whether to eliminate the motor vehicle traffic based upon criteria identified in the amendment, the policy and procedures, and only once these conditions have been satisfied. Before opening it up for questions, I did also want to comment on some additional observations I have made after consulting with many residents and businesses on recovery and open streets. While we've already shared with Council the objective of municipal recovery efforts, that it's to accelerate economic recovery and drive people traffic to our commercial districts, another way of saying this is that we are also trying to encourage residents to re-engage with the businesses they used to interact with prior to COVID-19. This is not easy. It's not easy as a customer or a consumer, and it's not easy as a business owner. We have not yet defeated this pandemic, and there continues to be reason to be vigilant. While no one can determine when we will get back to the quote unquote normal, what I can share with you is that I've been exceptionally impressed with the level of detail and consideration that our local businesses are taking to offer the amazing products and services they've always offered, all while upholding the mandatory orders of social distancing. I've personally felt very safe to engage with the businesses in my neighborhood and across the city. And all anecdotal, I have observed that more and more customers are prepared to re-engage with their local businesses as well. And I am noticing more and more people in lines at coffee shops, entering into resale stores, getting much needed haircuts, and sitting down for a meal. The city's involvement in recovery and open streets is to further facilitate this trend, stimulating our economy and reasserting our sense of community. With that, I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Councillor Hickey, you had your hand up first, and then the Deputy. Thank you, Councillor Hickey first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Phil or to the acting city manager. I guess my concern is certainly a challenge in an organization of our size is to make sure we're nimble enough to be able to react to community concerns on a project like this in a relatively quick fashion. Can you just talk to me a little bit more, or just offer a little bit more insight as to how we're customizing the program to meet the needs of specific businesses, and how we'll be able to react based on feedback and commentary throughout the process?
It's a great question. Thank you, Councillor Hickey. We've already done this once. The practice will be that before any open street occurs, we're going to meet with all the impacted businesses from those streets that are impacted. So we did that for the Grand in Canterbury, and some attended, and there was both positive and some concerns related to it. So we collect that, and then we will tweak it accordingly. Right now, nobody should think that a lot of animation is going to happen for these streets. And I think one of the things that we've been saying in these interactions is that this is not a Moonlight Bazaar every weekend. This is not third shift every weekend. It is not Rib Fest every weekend. It is a temporary pedestrian street for the weekend. Picture Spark Street in Ottawa. It's once a weekend that will happen. There'll be some animation to bring some crowds, but this is not a circus every weekend of events to kind of compete with the exhibition and all the other types of endeavors that people would take on. This is really a pedestrian street. Bring people to that street, enjoy it, interact with the local businesses. Some may engage, but it might also bring people that would otherwise not walk by your business, who would otherwise think that. We will make these tweaks as we go. I think the easiest way is we kind of came out saying we're going to do 12, and we still very much might do 12. But what we heard from the local businesses is make this a pilot. And if it works really well, go to 12. And so, listen, I think we can be successful in this. And I think we very much can do 12, but let's assess after 3. Let's make sure it's right. We've tweaked it a little bit because of the impact of no businesses really had plans to animate currently. So we could do an events during the day. We don't want to put it into night. And we also know that there's a night crowd that comes in and parks very close to restaurants, for example, to access those restaurants. So we want to accommodate that. However, we could down the road have somebody who says, I want to extend my liquor license and I want it to happen from 6 p.m. to 12 p.m., which is not unheard of for an extension of a liquor license. They wouldn't want to do it during the day always. And that's going to cause some discussion as well, whether you want to do that or whether you want to free up the space for parking. Today, we don't have to deal with that because we don't have that plan ahead of us. But for the first one, we think that it is diligent to scale back the length of it and to push it back a week to give a little bit more time to prepare for that. So that approach, when we shared that with the businesses that shared some concern, as well as businesses we engaged, thought those were very appropriate tweaks to make, especially for the first one.
Excellent. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, it was. I think it's a reasonable response, and as long as we can maintain that throughout the process, I think we'll be better for it, and making sure that we adapt for specific businesses to make sure we're meeting their needs. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're supporting the community as a whole in this, and making sure that we're finding the solution that works best, which always isn't necessarily one solution. So. Thanks very much, and I appreciate your effort on this.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I thank staff for everything they've done on this. I have had a number of concerns from businesses, and I want to know how fast we can, certain things I would leave out, like Germain Street, for instance, in the evenings. I understand that there's only one restaurant that will be open in the evenings, and it's going to be very difficult for them. Italian by night, they're not really in favor of it. I just don't want to be seen as being harmful against any of our businesses, because they're all having a hard time getting started because the public hasn't really come to grips yet with feeling comfortable about going out to the businesses and everything. So that will take time. The other issue is rotating streets. Can we get our citizens to really know, without doing a lot of advertising, what streets are going to be used to, closed off for each night? I think that might pose an issue instead of having just like certain streets and they're closed every evening. My other thing is that for the events, we can't have over 50 in a group. So, you can't have like a concert on a street or something that's going to bring out a lot of people, because we're not allowed to do that for Canada Day coming up. So I don't like to say that we can do it for other events. We got to kind of be fair across the board on how we do that. So that's a bit of a concern for me. The other thing is that once we pass third reading tonight, then just say that we have an issue with, say, Germain Street. If you're going to have it just the way it is tonight, and we pass third reading, do we have to come back and redo that, revise the third reading? before it can be law again? I mean, that's a concern of mine because how long will that take? So maybe somebody can answer that.
Okay. Sorry, Commissioner Hamilton, you were going to jump in?
Yes, Your Worship. I just want to address the Deputy Mayor's point. What you're deciding on tonight is the bylaw and policy guidance to enable the open streets to happen, not the specifics of an operational plan or what street it includes. At this point, that will be these amendments will give flexibility for the city manager working together with the chief of police to actually develop detailed operational plans to address some of the concerns that are being raised by the business community. So it's not the specifics of streets closing at a specific schedule. It's really to enable this kind of streamlined approach to open streets.
So that would mean that if you found that it was sort of having a negative effect on some of the businesses, supposing on Jermaine Street, then you would just not have the closed street happen and we wouldn't have to go back and change any bylaw. Is that the way it works?
I can maybe jump in. After tonight, there is no more bylaw changes as it relates to rotating streets. It's going to authorize the city manager to take it on as the acting city manager / commissioner has indicated. But it is something that we will consult every time with the businesses that are implicated. And listen, as mentioned previously, street openings, it's not for everybody. There's always going to be some opposition. So, if council is indicating tonight that they want zero opposition, that any opposition that is brought forward for this, that we should back away from it, please let us know. But there will be challenges. We're going to try to prevent it as much as possible. That's what we've done this evening. But an open street is not universally accepted as a good at every given time. That's something I've mentioned from the start as we talked about open streets. We think that we can mitigate it through tweaks and accommodation as much as possible, and we will continue with that every single time we do this. And if there's occasions that we think it's too much, we will recommend not doing it. We absolutely, no plan of this is to interfere with the recovery of a business. It is the complete opposite. It is to support a business's recovery. So if there's proof that it's going to really hamper on a business's ability to recover, we will review that and consider that absolutely.
So just one final thing, and then I'm finished. What if we have, I don't know what we really planned for to attract people to the streets, but what if we do have something and we attract hundreds of people? How are we going to control that, I guess?
It's a great question, and absolutely these street openings will have to maintain social distancing, and there will be signage, there will be protocol, and we will uphold the same level of due diligence that we would give for any group today that wanted to do an event somewhere in St. John on our municipal property. We would uphold that same level of due diligence. So we intend to uphold that. We think the easiest way is through circulation, that this is not an event, this is a circulation of people through an open street to pedestrianize it and to interact with those businesses. And there will be staff on site to ensure that it doesn't get larger than it should be as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Casey?
Thank you, Worship. So just to be clear, the plan is for Saturdays 8 to 4, starting July 11th, I believe, for the next 3 Saturdays starting July the 11th, rotating the streets. Is that, so that's the plan as of right now anyway?
Yeah, through you, Councillor Casey, to council. That is the plan. The first 3 starting on the 11th. The first one is for Saturday only, but as mentioned earlier, we'll consult with all the businesses on the next round, the next scenario, and if there's a big appetite for two nights or that the time might need to be adapted, we will do that as well. I can understand that this might be a little bit challenging from a communication standpoint, but evidently this program will require extensive communications through social media and through our website and to the public to ensure that they're aware of what's going on and when it's happening. So the first one, absolutely, 8 o'clock till 4 o'clock. That is the plan. That's what we're going to proceed with on the 11th, and more information to come on the next two consecutive weekends.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Okay, thank you. Jacqueline, I guess answered it. I like the options. I mean, we get this thing started, and then you have the flexibility to do what you want. Like the deputy brought up about Germain Street. I mean, there's really only one business there, but working with the business is what is most important to me. There's no sense having events if there's nothing going on. I mean, it'll make us look bad. All the streets are closed and they're deserted. So you definitely have to get the restaurants, the bars, and the businesses involved in promoting. And it's a catch-22. Because when you do that, the moon thing, you get 10,000 people there, and they're going to crucify us because of social distancing. So I don't envy the staff's position on trying to get people out, and then you get too many people. It could become a nightmare. As long as you have the flexibility to work with the businesses. Because I was reading, this was kind of written in stone after we do the third reading. But I'm assuming it's all kinds of flexibility after tonight. Correct? All right. Thank you.
He's trying to unmute himself. I think, yeah, I think you've got a head shake confirmation. Thank you. Councillor Reardon, please.
Thank you, Worship. I have had some emails. I've talked to people who are a bit hesitant about it, but there's so many people that are really looking forward to this. You have to remember that those roads are owned by the city, and not that long ago, probably in, I don't know if it was March or April, we committed $7 million just to asphalt. So the citizens of St. John are paying for roads. They pay a lot of money for roads. This is going to give them a couple of nights over the summer to actually get out there and walk on those roads. And everyone's doing it in Paris. They put sand down on one of their major roads every summer because I think most Parisians take, I think it's August off, and they sweep it up, and now they're closing roads. Everybody is doing this to get their pedestrians out on your roads and to provide space for the people who are paying for those roads to enjoy them. I think it's a good idea, and all for the public, and it's already been said by Jacqueline Hamilton, all we're doing is giving the authority to staff to go ahead. The streets belong to the city. We're in the seats where we say what happens on the streets. We're giving them the authority. They're going to set the plans out. So I think we should at least try it. I have so many people, 4 o'clock's not late enough in my opinion, but I have so many people who are looking forward to grabbing a table under one of those lit up trees outside and having a drink with their special person on the street. You're only going to get a few weeks to do it. So it's going to be great, I think. So I'm very, very supportive of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't think I had anybody else. I have a couple of comments, but I want to give, okay, I don't see any other hands. So first of all, thank you, Commissioner Hamilton, the city manager, to you, Deputy Commissioner, to your team. I know you've done a lot of work. Really what we're talking about tonight is some policy latitude and bringing life to some programs. I think as we move forward, I think we've learned a lot about roles and responsibilities, over the last few weeks. I've had a number of conversations as well with business owners, and we're in unprecedented times. I know there's a lot of stress for the business owners. So thank you for the feedback. We're not trying to hinder you. We're trying to be a help. I know I had a chat with, I won't tell you who, but a business owner for quite some time on Friday. And there were some challenges that they're facing as businesses that I'm not sure any one of us solve. So the daytime traffic, the towers that are maybe a bit empty, the open parking spaces during the middle of the day that didn't exist. But I think they wanted to make sure that we acknowledged and we knew that that was there. And that's why it's so critically important, I think, commissioners and everyone on the call here, that we're working with the chamber, with Uptown St. John. And I know it's a very difficult time, but as decisive as we can all be, if we're not going to do it don't do it. If we're going to do it, do it. But let's know that we're sort of moving forward. So some of those business challenges, Deputy Commissioner, like more traffic in the daytime, and free parking, and all kinds of other elements that have been discussed. I'm not sure we can solve all those on our own. So please stay tightly in contact with the chamber, with Uptown St. John, and as we move forward through this, and just help manage expectations. But as Councillor Reardon said, I too am excited. Let's try something. And I think you've got enough flexibility now built into the program, Phil, Deputy Commissioner, that I'm excited to try something as well. Okay, if somebody would like to move the recommendations, we have first the adopt 2020 open street policy and procedure for city initiated open streets. Thank you. Councillor Reardon is moved, seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. So I think Common Clerk, I'll just vote on that first, because I think our second item has a couple of motions, I believe, eh?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, so we'll just vote on that first recommendation, please. First, on that question, I'll call the vote. All those in favor, please show a hand. Thank you. And anyone contrary minded? Thank you. Not seeing or hearing anyone. And then we need a third reading motion, please, for the amendment to traffic bylaw attached. Thank you. Councillor Hickey is moved. Okay, and the deputy has seconded that. Okay, thank you. And sorry, that's first by in help me.
Yeah, it's reading by entirety, Your Worship.
I apologize. Thank you, Councillor Hickey. You're fine with that. The deputy, I assume you're fine with that. Okay, thank you. I'll call that question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Councillor Norton, are you contrary minded? Yes, you are. Okay, thank you. One vote against.
Your Worship, this is a bylaw to amend a bylaw respecting traffic in the streets of the City of St. John, being enacted by Common Council of the City of St. John as follows. The bylaw of the City of St. John entitled A Bylaw Respecting Traffic on Streets in the City of St. John, bylaw number MV 10.1, and amendments thereto enacted on the 7th day of October 2019 is amended as follows. 1, subsection 2.2 is amended by adding the following definition. City manager. City manager means city manager of the City of St. John, and includes his designate and successor. 2, the following subsection is added immediately after subsection 16.7. 16.8, pedestrian traffic only, including associated commercial and entertainment activity, is permitted upon a street or a portion thereof on the dates and during the time stipulated by the city manager and the chief of police, is accordingly authorized to reroute motor vehicle traffic upon condition that the city manager has first confirmed in writing and filed with the chief of police his assessment that A, such restriction will be conducive to the economic, social, or cultural well-being of the community. B, adequate provision has been made to assure access and egress for 1, authorized emergency vehicles, 2, commercial operations fronting the street or portion thereof in question, and 3, tenants residing in buildings fronting on the street or portion thereof in question. C, arrangements have been made for 1, notification of the community generally and the residents or businesses located on the street or portion thereof in question. 2, personnel to erect, operate, and remove barriers or barricades. And 3, the collection, separation, and removal of recyclables and solid waste.
Okay, thank you.
Move third reading by title.
Thank you. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. On that question, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please show a hand. Okay, thank you. And anyone contrary minded? Okay, that motion is carried. Thank you.
A bylaw to amend a bylaw respecting the traffic on streets in the City of St. John, bylaw number MV 10.1 and amendments thereto.
Okay, thank you. Next item.
Your Worship, 12.2 on the agenda is a related item. It's entitled Economic and Community Recovery, 15-minute parking spaces.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hamilton, are you going to introduce? Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Your Worship, members of council. This item before you this evening is a suite of parking bylaw amendments to allow 15-minute curbside parking pickup spaces at various locations in the uptown. Again, this initiative is intended to support the city's economic and community recovery efforts. Now turn things over to Mark Dion, who is prepared to provide an overview of the specific bylaw amendments.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dion.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council, and thank you, Commissioner Hamilton, for this. So what we have before you tonight is a resolution to change 10 two-hour metered parking spaces to 15-minute parking spaces. The idea here would be to create higher turnover in the city, allow businesses to have more traffic coming in and out of their business. Today, with 2 hours and the restrictions of COVID-19, the businesses have capacity to produce more. However, because people are there for longer amounts of time, the idea here would be if we had a shorter time frame, we could get more people in and out of the business and help support the business in that fashion. So these spots today are all 2-hour metered parking spaces. We'd convert them to 15-minute parking spaces, and they would continue to be paid parking for that time frame. The 10 spots that we've designated, and again, we would look at this continually. We would update and adapt as required based on the needs of the businesses and based on whatever's changing with respect to the pandemic that's going on right now. So the 10 spaces that we identified were 1 on Charlotte, 1 on Canterbury Street, 3 on Germain, 1 on North King Square, 2 on Prince William, and 2 on Princess Street. With that, there would be really no financial impact with respect to parking. We're still having people with the ability to pay for parking. We're just getting more people in. And again, this is all done in an effort to help support the businesses. As noted in Move SJ, there are an abundance of parking spaces throughout the uptown. So this is really going to have no impact whatsoever. We've done extensive consultation with the public, with all the development agencies, and we've also done a lot of review with all the stakeholders involved. And I won't go over the list because it's in your package there, but we've had a lot of consultation and there's a lot of support for this. In the end, we've asked the city solicitor to draft a bylaw amendment to change the parking time frame from 2 hours to 15 minutes for the spots that I've designated in your package. And with that, so I'll keep it short and sweet. We're open to any questions.
Okay, thank you. So we would need, okay, thank you. Questions? Councillor Reardon, did you have your hand up for questions?
Just to move the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So you're going to move a first and second. So moved first reading. Thank you. Seconded by the deputy. Are you seconding that? Okay, sorry, Councillor Hickey. Do you have a question?
I have a question too.
Go ahead, deputy. Yep.
I just wanted to know, Mark, is this for the long term, or is this, it could have been in the report, but is this going to go on, like if it works, you're going to keep it going like for the next 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever?
Through you, your worship, to the deputy, absolutely. So the plan is now with this change, it would be a permanent change. However, we're willing to adapt and work with the businesses as required. So the change now is permanent, but certainly open for flexibility to help out when we need to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Hickey, question?
Just a quick one, Mark. Similar concern to open streets. Any understanding from businesses as to what impact will be, positive or otherwise? Any anticipation there?
Through your worship to Councillor Hickey, absolutely. Certainly a lot of the feedback that we've received, not only recently because of the pandemic, but even prior to this, the whole idea of having some sort of metered parking is to get that changeover and overflow to the businesses so they can have more and more people in there. That's the whole premise behind metered parking. That said, you know, the vast majority of people that I've spoken with are very much in support of this. They want to get more people in, and now they're restricted because of the pandemic, you know, due to 50 in their business. It's a perfect opportunity here to seize and allow more traffic to come in, pick something up, at least put the order in online and help support those businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. And, you know, I think it's a similar sentiment shared with, you know, our previous conversation, really about making sure that we're continuing to get volume in the uptown. We're continuing to have people involved in the economy uptown. You know, we just saw that I think it was the Board Game Cafe that won't be reopening on Prince William Street, right? And the fewer stories we can have of that, the more we can support our business, and the more we can support their activities in the uptown, the better. So, you know, I think this is another positive step. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Strobridge.
Thank you, Worship. Mark, I'm just curious, are other cities doing this? Like, where did you come up with this idea?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Strobridge. This is something that's really come up through the public here in St. John. I can't comment on whether other cities are doing it because I don't know. But certainly the feedback from the businesses around here in the St. John area, they're very supportive of this and want to do it. And I don't know if Deputy Commissioner Willett could comment on that a little more, but certainly the public around here wants it.
No, I think it sounds great. I mean, nothing wrong with trying it out. I was just curious if we had got that idea from somewhere else where we could say, yeah, and it works really well in Halifax as an example. That's all. But good work.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick comment, Mr. Dion. It's way too granular, but just curious about will you have some fun signage on the spot? How will you let folks know that it is an in and out? Will you have a NASCAR team there to change tires and clean windshields as well? So I actually, council can do that one day. We'll be the NASCAR team. Just signage or however you're going to promote it, I'll leave that to you and your great team. So, okay, well, perfect. Thank you. I don't see anyone else, so I'll call the question on first reading. All those in favor, please signify by showing a hand. Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Okay, not seeing or hearing anyone. Thank you. Common Clerk.
A bylaw to amend a bylaw respecting the regulations of parking in the city of St. John and amendments thereto.
Okay, thank you. Move second reading by Councillor Hickey, seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. Okay, and on that, I don't any debate. Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Motion is carried. Thank you.
A bylaw to amend a bylaw respecting the regulations of parking in the city of St. John and amendments thereto.
Okay, thanks again to the growth team and the parking team and everyone else involved in these amendments. Thank you. Next item, please, Common Clerk.
Your Worship, item 12.3 on the agenda is a sustainability item with respect to arena closure plan follow-up.
Okay, thank you. Would somebody could just ask everybody to mute again, please? And yeah, sorry. Thank you. You're right, Deputy. We have to lift it from the table first. Moved by the Deputy, second by Councillor Reardon. On the tabling motion, lifting. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing anyone. Thank you very much. And thank you very much. So, Commissioner Hugenholtz, you're going to introduce, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and good evening to members of council. At the last council session, when this item was discussed, staff heard concerns expressed around the plan for the Hilton Bellier Arena. Not so much about the plan to close, but more around the demolition of the building and other potential opportunities for continued use of the arena. It is important to get a council decision on this item this evening, as it is one of the sustainability items required to close the gap in 21 and 22. We have some revised recommendations in front of you this evening that will allow for an evaluation of all options regarding the sale of the property, which we feel address the concerns that we have heard. With that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner O'Reilly, who's going to walk you through a brief presentation that touches on some of the considerations with respect to alternative operating models and next steps for the sale of the property.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. If I could just get a thumbs up from the mayor, you can see my presentation. Thank you very much, sir.
All good.
So as Commissioner Huguenot mentioned, we were before you just a week ago this evening with a recommendation to...
Sorry, Commissioner, somebody's not on mute there, please. Thank you, Commissioner. Go ahead, Deputy Commissioner. Sorry, Deputy Mayor, pardon?
Well, it's all garbled. Everything's garbled. I can't understand you. And
Okay.
everything's gone.
Okay, I can maybe Deputy Commissioner stop sharing and then share again. I can see it fine, Deputy Mayor. I'm not sure what's going on. Maybe stop for a moment and then reshare, perhaps.
Is that better, Deputy?
Deputy Mayor, can you see that?
It's still garbage, but well, it's reduced in size, but your voices are all garbled. But keep going.
Okay. Can you just mute your mic, please, Deputy? Go ahead, Deputy Commissioner.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, you're muted there. Thank you, Deputy. Okay, Deputy Commissioner.
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. So as again, we were before you a week ago with a recommendation to close the Ville Arena and to sell the property. It was part of the overall sustainability plan for 21 and 22 with a set amount of savings towards a $10 million deficit. We did recommend at the time a week ago that the site should not be used as an arena anymore, mainly because of the oversupply of arenas within St. John with all that we have within the community. The council last week did the table a motion to make a decision. And as well, later on in the agenda, council also considered a proposal referred to the growth committee in terms of looking at other options for two of the arenas within St. John. If I can summarize some of the feedback that councillors made during that discussion a week ago, one was there's some concern related to limiting the options for the Hilton Ville Arena site, specifically the notion of not using it as an ice arena. As well, there was also interest overall in exploring alternate operating and ownership models for the arenas. This was touched on a week ago. I'm just going to touch on it again quickly. So the plan overall for arenas within St. John fits very nicely into the city's overall restructuring plan. So prong 2, again, was that notion of the $10 million deficit for 21 and 22. The closure of one arena fit into that prong or that part of the plan nicely. Prong 3 of the city's restructuring plan speaks more on the long-term opportunities for the city of St. John for transformational change. And the notion of an ICE strategy, a long-term vision for the city's arena inventory, really fits in nicely with that long-term vision for the city of St. John. In response to some of the concerns expressed a week ago, we do indicate in the recommendations in the staff report an expression of interest, which we'd like to put out to the public, really describe more of an all options approach. So instead of focusing on sell the site without an arena on it, we want to expand that out as is with an opportunity for different investors or interested groups to look for options for that site, even with an arena on it. We do indicate in the report and as a recommendation that we include a non-competition clause within that expression of interest. Again, to protect the city's revenue stream from the other three city arenas and the LBR. And again, as indicated, we have too many arenas within St. John. We don't want to dilute the revenues more than we already envisioned with that $155,000 savings. And by introducing a non-competition clause, which is a common practice, certainly within industry and business when you look to sell a parcel of property. So that non-competition clause would certainly protect the city's financial interests in ensuring revenues are sustained in the other city-owned operated arenas. Once we get past that initial, again, the short-term arena closure plan, we touched on this last week as well, the notion of an overall ICE strategy for the city. Listed on the screen now are different items that will be included within that overall strategy. The first two listed are very fundamental to the overall strategy. Those questions really need to be answered early on in that process in terms of what our stock for arenas are going to be long-term. So again, the notion of whether this study is going to be regional or a city-owned approach is very important. As we talked about many times with council, and council is supportive of, these facilities are regionally used facilities, and therefore why not approach that from a regional perspective one more time. The notion of community priorities and community values that we place in these arenas also needs to be looked at in city staff's view very early on in the process. Up on the screen right before you now is a set of values that we've entrenched, the council's entrenched within city policy. So on the left-hand side of the screen is the city's ICE allocation policy, which indicates which groups get which ICE time in order of priority. And some of those groups and considerations for more prime time within our city rinks are up on the screen right now. On the right hand of the screen is the city's relatively new recreation subsidization policy, which talks about those groups that actually pay less for an hourly rate for arenas that are owned and operated by the city of St. John. So those values, in addition to our financial values, are very much entrenched in how we manage our arenas currently. A couple of points with respect to this. Again, first of all, this notion of providing the highest access to ICE, highest priority ICE to those groups that pay less is actually quite counter to the whole supply-demand model in an open market. So typically the higher demand services and products, those have the higher prices. The way we run our rinks right now, those groups that actually pay less, so again, our youth recreational, our tournaments, our seniors, our schools, actually pay the lowest, but also get the highest priority of ICE. So that's a bit of a juxtaposition and conflicts a bit with the city's overall financial approach to arenas, but it's a very legitimate and very established set of policies that council has adopted with respect to its arenas. So in addition to answering those fundamental questions, whether all those values, financial allocation policies, the rates that we charge in arenas are still valid, we have to look at other options or other components of this overall ICE strategy, whether it be subsidization, our overall plan for arenas, whether they remain community type facilities or we go to a multiplex, which is recommended in Plan SJ. Introducing and analyzing those operating and ownership models, which is very important, expressed to councilors a week ago. And of course, with any good strategy, we need to align those with existing strategies, whether it be growth related or financial related. And as we've mentioned, this really should be a project that's completed after 2020, again, after we've dealt with those initial sustainability challenges within St. John. I do want to mention as part of the strategy that it's very important and are certainly a plan of staff to extensively consult with this overall ICE strategy. Something that I've been pretty proud of the last couple of years. We've had some very difficult discussions with our sports organizations, whether it be regionalization of those services, the rates that we're charging, even which arena we should close. Been very open, transparent, and one-on-one and group dialogue with these sports associations. So as we go down this road for the future of our arenas, we absolutely have to extend that consultation and it'd be even more extensive as we look to some of these decisions that need to come down the road. So before you this evening, worship and council, again, the lifting of the motion, which is already done, modified set of recommendations, which are in the staff report. Again, consistent to close the Hilton Ville Arena. We are recommending to delay demolishing the building, explore an all options approach, and an expression of interest. We do think it's very important as staff that we protect that $155,000 savings by having the non-competition clause within the EOI process. And again, to look towards 2021 for the long-term ICE strategy. The benefits of this approach, a modified approach, again, as staff, it's our job to listen to counselors and council. And certainly we listened to that feedback a week ago. And we believe these modified recommendations respond to some of those concerns expressed a week ago. They respond the need to look at other options for the Hilton Ville Arena, including potentially keeping it as an ICE arena, as well as going very much along with some of the discussion later on in the agenda a week ago in terms of exploring those operating and ownership models as part of the ICE strategy. It also maintains alignment with council's decisions it's already made, whether it be part of the sustainability plan for 21 and 22, and again, the overall restructuring plan. So we do feel this modified approach does respond to those concerns expressed by councillors, but also holds true to council's decisions it made with respect to closing an arena, keeps our finances in order, and also allows us to look to the future of those arenas and beyond the year 2020. And with that, Your Worship, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll turn it back over to you for questions and comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Commissioner O'Reilly, for that presentation. Do I have a mover of the recommendation on the? Thank you. Moved by Councillor McKenzie. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Strobridge. Okay, thank you. Councillor Reardon, comments, questions? Councillor Sullivan? Okay, Councillor Reardon, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Tim, I'll support this tonight. I see that you want your 155 protected, your savings, but spending 250 to tear that down, to me, I don't know, it doesn't add up. But anyways, I don't like the non-competition clause, but I am going to go along with it because we say we're going to do the ICE strategy and figure out where that goes. I think, I just feel like, should we be in arenas or shouldn't be in arenas? I don't know. I have a struggle with that, I guess. If people aren't using them, then maybe we shouldn't be in them. So I don't know, but I'll wait and see how that comes out. But tonight I will support this, although I still have a struggle with it, especially with the non-competition clause. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sullivan? You're muted, sir.
Sorry, I hit the button. The computer was catching up. I agree with Councillor Reardon's question that I don't think is tonight's discussion, but should we be in the arena business? At one point in time, we were in the community center business, and we have found a different way to do that on the whole. With regards to specifically the Bellier, I do understand the one-time cost of $250,000 versus the every year off into the future cost of the 155. I just want to make it clear. I think it's clear for me through you, Your Worship, to Mr. O'Reilly. If we didn't have that competition clause, that 155 is built into our strategy for the overall 10 million. So if we don't have the competition clause, if we don't protect that 155, then we're looking at going to the backup list and choosing the next $155,000. Maybe it's not you, maybe it's the city manager, but the next $155,000 off that backup list because this was already built in.
That is true, through Your Worship, to the councillor. We did recognize a reduction in revenue by closing an arena. We estimated about $44,000 of demand that we cannot accommodate. But as you know, we do have latent demand or latent supply in the rest of our arenas. So we did build in some opportunity to fill that demand in the other city-owned operated arenas. Certainly without that competition clause, the risk is there that we take some of the clients that we serve within our city-owned operated arenas and be served instead by the privately run arena, and that would dig into that 155,000 further. And as you pointed out, Councillor, there will potentially be the need to dig into that standby list to come up with whatever's left over after the reduction in revenues.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, Tim, I'm going to support this tonight. I do have some concerns, but most of them have been alleviated. The other way of looking at this, of course, is to have a situation where you're not allowed to compete with the rinks in St. John, but fill your boots if people want to come in from outlying areas and use the Hilton Bellier. So I mean, there is a possibility that it could remain as an arena and use people from outside to come in and maybe even grow our population. So knowing that we're going to have these conversations going forward, we had a terrific talk show this morning on CBC with Mark Hughes, and so I'd like to thank him and his group and Dr. Mike Simon and that group, for thinking outside the box on this one. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Strobridge, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tim, is the no competition clause only for hockey?
It would be for ICE use of the arena. So we would take a look at our existing clients for our other city-owned operated arenas and ensure there's no, taking away of clients for ICE sports generally. Going back to Councillor McKenzie's point, he's absolutely right. If it stays as an ICE arena and the operator finds clients that are outside of that group that we serve, that would certainly be a situation that wouldn't be competing with our current clients and our other city-owned operated arenas. So it's not just limited to hockey, but certainly we want to make sure that we're not, again, taking demand away from our city-owned operated arenas.
So it's limited to anything that would involve ice?
Correct.
Okay. And I think that's good. I mean, I'm perfectly okay with the competition clause because private operators will undercut their competition. And if the competition is the city, they're going to undercut us. That's no brainer. That's business. But the other thing too is there is more that takes place in our arenas and our rinks than just wintertime activities. I mean, as an example, the Lord Beaverbrook rink gets rented in the summertime frequently for various things. And so if the Bellier stays open and a private business buys it, well, if I can rent the Bellier for cheaper than I can rent the LBR, where am I going to go? I'm going to go to the Bellier. If I'm a concert promoter, or if I want to host the annual gymnastics show that is currently being done usually at the LBR, or anybody else. So the only protection that the city has is for ice. Is that right?
That would certainly be the main point. I mean, we would ensure that the city's general financials are protected. But again, going back to some of the early comments, again, we're changing our position this evening compared to a week ago by not immediately looking to demolish that building. There are lots of opportunities, whether it's used for ice or other purposes besides an ice arena, that could be used by the private sector. We may be able to save as well that $250,000 demolition cost by selling the property as is. We're just saying as staff is we want to ensure that when we look at those other uses that are proposed, there are no direct competitions to other city facilities. That would be the point. So I don't want to pigeon it whole into just ice, but certainly that would be the gist of it, and we would take a wide look at the rest. But again, with this all options approach, we basically can open the door to different possibilities that different stakeholders can use to propose to the city.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, I am a concert promoter and I want to rent a venue in St. John that's not TD Station because it's too big. So let's say the Bellier is converted and somebody owns it and they use it as an entertainment complex or whatever. It's a huge space. Or let's say instead of renting the Trade and Convention Center, I want to hold my conference over at the Bellier. I can do that. I'm not going to be stopped by any city policy, even though that now I'm going to go to the Bellier because the Trade and Convention Center is too expensive and they're offering me for cheaper.
So again, we would look at all the proposals that come before us. I think one of your points is a very valid one, Councillor Strobridge. You mentioned that some events may not be appropriate for other city-owned buildings. Maybe they need to be a smaller venue than some of the other facilities. That would certainly be an opportunity that would not be a competition to another city-owned operated facility. So again, we don't want to take any options off the table. We would just, when those proposals come forward, we would look at what potential competition there might be for other city-owned operated arenas. But your suggestion of another facility that might not be appropriate would be a situation that would not be a competition for other city-owned operated facilities.
There's lots of flexibility is what I think we're hearing, and we have to figure it out. But it's not going to be in direct competition to ICE.
No, I just fear that it's going to be in direct competition to everything else, right?
Well, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. When we get there, Councillor Strobridge, those are great questions to ask for sure. Councillor Norton, I see you, Councillor Reardon. Councillor Norton first, please.
Yeah, no, thank you, Your Worship. I think Mr. O'Reilly's answered my questions. I appreciate the flexibility. I think we need to somehow maintain options for the public. One of the things I'm concerned about is it's just not city-owned facilities and assets that drive people to move here and invest here. It's also the innovative approaches and the opportunities that the private sector can provide. And if there's opportunity there for the private sector to turn something that we can no longer afford to manage and operate into an attractive feature for our community and serve a subset of our population that isn't accessing our rinks and facilities already, I think that just complements our suite of offerings. So I hope when it comes time that we look judiciously, I guess, at those opportunities, knowing that these are folks that are bringing some good things to the table. And I think Councillor McKenzie said it already as it relates to Dr. Simon and the group at the LBR. I think they're doing good work. I would say that the public is pleased with their performance. I think we need to listen to some of those sound checks in terms of what folks are doing. So I just don't, the non-competition clause, I don't want to be so restrictive that what we do is we limit our options, because these things can help grow our community for all our facilities. So thank you. I guess thank you for opening it up a little bit, Mr. O'Reilly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Worship. I guess I'm going down the same road as Councillor Strobridge and Councillor Norton. I guess for me, my struggle is when you're a big player like the city and you have a non-competition clause, I often worry if that stifles creativity from the private sector. And that can bring things to your city that we don't have maybe. So I am also leery of it. I'm supporting this tonight. I just want to make sure that staff understands that those restrictions I don't think are good for us, because a new owner could invent a new use. And so I think that's important to recognize.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of comments. Thank you as well, Mr. O'Reilly, Commissioner Hugenholtz, for listening to the concerns last week. A couple things for me. First of all, I'm hopeful that we support the closure decision tonight, and then move forward with the new plan and recommendations that you've put forward. I think for me, it's that cause and effect. I mean, I am supportive actually at this stage of the non-competition, because I'm not interested in fact, the bigger conversation I'm interested in is should we even be in the hockey business? Some of you have mentioned that doesn't please public and media. I didn't say don't offer hockey in Greater St. John. Should we be the ones in that business? The bigger discussion, so we subsidize arenas to the tune of $979,000 a year. We have subsidization overall to the tune of $9,759,000 a year. That's the bigger discussion. If there's another means to deliver ice hockey and it's a private sector consortium of some kind, and then fine. I'm fine with that, but I'll qualify that just a moment. I am glad to see in this recommendation, Mr. O'Reilly, moving forward with the ice strategy. There's been a lot of work done there, Council. We haven't gotten it over the finish line, but there's been quite a bit of work regionally done on that already. And in that work, this is how we arrived, I think, at us having one too many rinks, and us closing that rink down is important to move that discussion forward again. I think it's important in that regional ice strategy for us all to recognize there's 10 hockey rinks, I missed one, St. Martin's. There's 11 hockey rinks from Grand Bay, Westfield, Hampton, in the city of St. John through to St. Martin's. So the more global discussion, Mr. O'Reilly, will be, are 11 hockey rinks enough? Should there be less? Should there be fewer? Do we replace a few? But I'm hopeful we can approach that as a region. If we're going to go on to explore privatization of any kind, it should be open, transparent process that allows folks to come and bid, and we cross the T's and dot the I's. Some of the things that my colleagues have spoken about tonight. And lastly, last two comments. One is that continuous improvement, the measurement of productivity. I think the fact that maybe in some cases we're a little worried that the private sector would be cheaper than us, we should be concerned about that, and we need to continue to work on our productivity and so on. And then lastly, these are complicated discussions. I had a few phone calls this week from folks that were saying, do not privatize at all. And I can tell you, I'm not enough of an expert on the pros and cons of it. And that's why we need your rink strategy commissioner, deputy commissioner. But they painted a picture on the other side of do not privatize at all. And here's lots of reasons why. So I just share those quick comments with you, Council. Thank you. Okay, so we have the recommendation on the floor. I didn't see any other hands, so I'm going to call the question now. All those in favor of the recommendation, please show a hand. Okay, and thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Okay, not hearing or seeing. Thank you, Deputy. You are waving. I'm not sure if you're for or against. You didn't put your hand up. Are you for? Can you put your thumbs up for for? You're muted. Okay. You're muted, Deputy, so I don't... Are you for it? Give me a thumbs up. Oh, there you go. You're for it. Okay, the deputy's for it. Thank you. Okay, Common Clerk, is that it for tonight? Okay, motion to adjourn, please.
Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan, and seconded by Councillor Hickey. On the question, thank you, everyone, for tonight. On the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Okay, thank you. Enjoy your evening, everyone. Thank you.